That was terrifying. Do you have any stories that you'd like to share with us? We might read your story on the show. Send it to the email below. We got a very interesting email here. It says, "This happened to my great-grandmother over 50 years ago in the Midwest. She told me many times about it, and it still creeps me out. She was alone at home. She had no phone. My grandfather was in the service overseas. The storm hit, and she was so scared. She said the walls of the house were shaking. She thought it was the end of the world. Then the most horrible sounds filled the air. She went downstairs to investigate and found that all of her chickens had been killed. They were spread all over the yard, and the only thing left intact was the coop. After that, we moved away from there. So, is that some sort of animal, or maybe something more sinister? Let me know what you think in the comments, and let's continue. Tearing down old houses can be a lucrative business. Old homes contain things that people want, making demolition profitable. But sometimes you find things you weren't expecting. This comes from a Reddit user. I used to work as a private money lender and owned a construction company. One of our clients was a guy who inherited an old house from his aunt who passed away. He said the house was full of crap and he wanted it demolished, so he hires us to do it. We tear down a lot of houses, and we've even done quite a few TV shows on house demolitions. But this one was different right from the start. All the usual excitement of finding treasures while destroying a building was absent. This house was creepy. As soon as our crew stepped foot on the property, they started experiencing strange occurrences. Tools would mysteriously go missing and then turn up in the strangest places. Conversations were suddenly cut off by loud bangs and crashes from within the house. The workers chalked it up to new guys needing to learn how to control their powers, but they were getting spooked. No one wanted to work on this house. Finally, I headed over myself. My foreman was a skeptic, and my presence calmed him down enough to finish the job. But as soon as we left, the problems started again. I tried reasoning with the client to let me send my best team. It wasn't money that was the issue here. This needed a sensitive approach. But he refused, saying that if I couldn't do the job, someone else would. I warned him, but he was adamant, so I sent my 3 most level-headed guys to get it done. They had a good rapport with each other, and nothing seemed to faze them. They made a little progress, and then the hauntings began. Things started flying across the work site, smashing into walls, and bursting through windows. My team called it quits after that day. I went back to the client and told him he'd have to wait until I could spare a crew. He argued with me that it was just an old house and these things happen, but I told him I wouldn't take responsibility if someone got hurt. He finally agreed to wait. A couple days later, I spared my most experienced and grounded crew to tackle the house. Nothing happened. No objects flew, nothing fell apart, and no voices echoed through the halls. We completed the house in a few days without a hitch. We cleared the site, hauled away the debris, and waited for the next project. I never did find out what happened to that place, though. The client was ecstatic with the work and paid promptly. To date, it's the only house we've ever walked away from without finishing. Yeah, I can't blame those workers for walking off that job. I'd be right there with them. The power of belief. This one comes from another Reddit user. When I was a kid, I used to visit my grandparents who lived in a small village in the mountains. In their village, there were old tales of a creature that roamed the mountainside. It was called a yowie. Yowies are huge, hairy bipeds similar to Bigfoot. My grandfather assured me that yowies were not real. I believed him. One night, I woke up to heavy footsteps outside my grandparents' house. I remember lying in bed thinking, yowies aren't real. Yowies aren't real. Despite telling myself this over and over again, I was terrified. Then I heard a knock on the door. I remember thinking, people don't come to mountain villages in the middle of the night, but still I didn't think much of it. Then the knocking continued for about 10 minutes, followed by loud yelling and banging on the walls. I remember my grandfather yelling back, "Get away, get away." Then everything stopped. I think that whatever it was, it climbed down the mountainside and disappeared. Maybe it was a bear or a large cat. But to this day, I wonder if it was a yowie. Yeah, me too. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. A light appeared. This one comes from a Reddit user. I grew up on a farm in a rural area. One night, I was woken up by what sounded like screams in the forest. I live in an area where there's lots of wolves, coyotes, and bears, so I wasn't too worried. I went back to sleep. In the morning, my mom asked if I heard those screams, to which I replied, "What screams?" She said, "Oh, you probably didn't hear anything. There's some crazy noises in the middle of the night sometimes. Fast forward a few months and it happens again. Big screams in the forest. Again, I'm not too worried and I go back to sleep. This happens a few times throughout the year. One night my family and I are sitting in the living room and we hear those screams again. At this point, my dad is pretty scared and gets his shotgun. He goes out the front door and into the forest to see if he can find anything. He comes back a few minutes later empty-handed and shaken. A few months pass and the screams happen again. But this time, as my dad is walking out the door, a bright white light appears in the sky above the trees. The light is very bright and almost looks like a spotlight. It disappears after a few seconds. My dad takes his gun and heads out the door. He comes back inside a few minutes later and tells us that he saw a very bright white light above the trees and that the screams seemed to be coming from above. That's when we decided that it would be best to leave the screaming to the forest. Yeah, you guys should do the same. I'm sorry, but I don't like the sound of that. I don't know what kind of screamer you have out there, but that doesn't sound friendly. While playing baseball, this comes from a Reddit user. I play baseball in a men's league. We were playing our rivals, the Purple Cows, and it was the bottom of the ninth. Our team was tied. There was a runner on second base. I was up to bat and I popped a foul ball. This is when the bases are loaded and it's up to you to hit the ball. So there I was in a big moment. Well, I took a swing and missed. The runner on second base took off for third. The catcher caught the ball and threw it to the third baseman, who was standing on the third base side of the third base bag. The third baseman looked up, saw the runner, and threw the ball back to the catcher. Now the runner on third is trying to make it back to second. So the third baseman reaches over and grabs the third base bag, looks up and tosses the bag back onto the bag. Well, in the brief moment when the third base bag was not on the base, the runner bolted for home plate. The third baseman noticed this and screamed, "Hey, you can't do that," and immediately threw the ball to the shortstop, who was covering home plate. The shortstop reached over and tagged the runner out before he could get his rear end back to third base, and that's when the impossible happened. The third baseman grabbed the base, shoved it into the dirt, and screamed, "Dirt devil, take this runner," and put him back on third. Immediately, the runner vanished from home plate and reappeared on third base. The entire team was stunned. The manager of the Purple Cows was furious, and the rest of the game was filled with tension. Our team ended up losing that game. And the last I heard, the manager was looking for that dirt devil to do some serious damage. So do you believe in the supernatural? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more scary stories, click the video on screen now.